Hey, welcome back to ZK MasterTech. In this video, we're going to inspect an S780 combine. I already did one video on an S670 combine, but there's a huge difference between a 7 class and an 8 class machine. So I wanted to do an inspection video on this 780 here so I could show you guys the difference. And shouldn't be too much wrong with this one. It's fairly new, so we're just going to go over this machine. We're going to take it outside and run it, make sure all the speeds are where they need to be, and we'll check the codes and everything like that. So let's check it out. Coolant level's low. That's nice. Good enough. Now, before we can run the separator, we got to open up the grain tank covers. So they ought to be opening up. Separator on. Feels pretty smooth. Make sure everything moves. We're going to move the threshing clearance here. All the way to 0, so then I like to open it all the way back up. So whenever I'm inspecting the machine, I can fully look at the Z-bar on the concave. Let that move. Speed the rotor up and down. what gear it's in. Probably only run 520 if it's in first. Yeah, it's only in first gear. You can see it's only going to 530. Slow it all the way down. Sorry about the shaking. Combines rumble a little bit when they're running empty. This one's actually running really smooth. So it's working all right. We're gonna go ahead and speed it all the way up. Cleaning fan speeds maxed out at 1350. Slow it down. Okay. Move the chaffer clearance. Shuts all the way. Open it up all the way. Close the sieve down. Okay. So everything's moving like it should. Now if you move it to a set point and it doesn't reach that point, it's going to set a code. See? Sieve set point not reach, which could just be because it's out of calibration, but there it went. Could have some cobs or something stuck in that sieve, and that's why it's not moving all the way. House goes down. Then the contour master. Okay. To unlock our controls so we can run the fore and aft. So that tilts the head of the feeder house fore and aft. Change the angle, your cutting angle. That's working. Kick the feeder house on. We'll run through the speeds. It's got a 5-speed feeder house drive. We're in first gear. There's second. Third. Fourth. And fifth. So it shifts off through the gears. It sounds nice. Alright, we're going to make sure the emergency stop works. That kills the header. Idle this thing down. Alright, kick the unload auger out. to the codes here. That code's active because we pushed the quick stop button. A lot of these codes are just nuisance codes. They don't really mean anything. Horn system. Cab horn circuit open. Might be for the rotation alarm system, possibly. Oh, he might have disconnected the rotation alarms, which I don't blame him. Coolant low, yeah, rotation alarm system fault, so. Okay. Right brake pedal switch problem. And a lot of these are inactive, so. Communication system fault. Shoe loss. Just going to clear all these, and then we'll run it and see what comes back later. Alright, we'll take this thing back inside and we'll check all the lights. So we got the machine back in, we checked the lights and they're good. Looks like we got about 1,200 engine hours and 860 separator hours. So, open up this door on the side of the cab here. We got our washer tank. Got a power module, the LC1 controller. These are all the test ports to check pressures on the clutches for the 5-speed gear case. We got our service ports for our AC. And a receiver dryer, and we're just looking for leaks on the AC lines here. Looking over the harness, make sure there's no mouse damage. Everything looks good. All right, so the first thing we do is I start on the right-hand feeder house drive, and we generally replace this chain every year, and you can tell here that it's all the way maxed out in adjustment. Sometimes you got extra master links in here to shorten the chain, but this one doesn't have anything left, so we'll recommend to replace this chain here. Here we'll check the spring tensioner for the conveyor chain in the feeder house, and this one needs tightened up a little bit. And we'll check the sensor, the linkage. This is the fore and aft position sensor. This here is the contour master position sensor. Make sure the linkage is tight. Check these cylinders for leaks. Make sure the drum adjustment is where it needs to be and staying in place. And we lift up on this back shaft to check the bearing. We inspect the wiring for the speed sensor and the position sensors. Let's follow it back. Make sure it's all secured nicely, and it is. And we check this slip clutch here. And I just take a pry bar and stick it back here and give it a good wiggle. Look for movement in here. And when you grease these, you don't want to put too much grease in them. Just put 1 or 2 pumps in each one. And I think it's like a 400-hour grease circ, so you don't want to just stick a grease gun in there and grease it till it comes out here, because if you put too much grease in these, they'll actually make them slip. So we'll take the tension off the feed accelerator belt here, inspect the spring, make sure it's not broken, and then I'll pull the belt off of the pulley, and then I'm gonna rotate it over by hand. It's a little dark, I need some light. It's got a hole through the backing there. it's starting to split in multiple places. Yeah, so it's got quite a few splits all the way through the ribs and the backing, so I recommend replacing that. I check the idlers, make sure they're not noisy and they're smooth. And then down here, this pulley here, this is your feed accelerator drive pulley. And we're going to try to get a pry bar in there so we can pick up on it, check the bearings on it. Just catch the lip of the top of the bearing housing and then lift up on the pulley. If that bearing was loose, it'd be clunking. So it's good. And I like to use a short 3/4 shank. This is a snap-on bar, but I like the length of it, and it's thick and it doesn't give any, and you can put more pressure on stuff and get it in tight spaces. Check our trans filter here. It doesn't have any hours marked on it, so we'll have to ask the customer whenever it was replaced last. Now I'm going to get in here and I'm going to check the oil level on the final drives, and I use a 9/16 triple square socket to take these plugs out. So this is the plug we're going to take out to check the oil level. Stick our finger in here, we can touch oil, yeah, and then we're good. And we inspect this is a vent right here. Now this will get covered with mud or dirt, crop material, and it'll block this vent. And then if this vent can't pop off and vent correctly, it'll force oil out places it's not supposed to be, whether it's the pinion seal, the seam seal here, which is famous for leaking down at the bottom of the final. So you want to make sure that these vents can open and ventilate and that they're clean. And another thing that this customer did was he added a remote grease extension. So this is going to where the grease circ would normally be on the final, and then he snaked it out here and put a grease point right here where you can grease that the final drive bearing from the outside without taking any shields off, which is pretty nice. All right, we're going to go ahead and take this chain off so we can rotate the feeder house over by hand. Got a 24mm nut here. Anyways, back that off. Master link off. Put it back together so we don't lose it. Take this chain off. You can just tell this chain's pretty worn. Alright, now we can check these idlers. Spin them. That one's a little noisy. Look at the guides. These plastic guides are replaceable here. Make sure none of this is bent. Check there's a tone wheel here to measure the back shaft speed that this sensor reads. That's good. You can move this sprocket, but it's seized up. Just needs some lube. We'll have to lube that. Now, now we can rotate this chain over by hand, inspect it. I like to put a mark on it so I know where I'm at. You can see this chain starting to spread a little bit. You got gaps in here. We're looking for wear on the rollers. Making sure all the hardware is intact, none of these bars are broken. Checking the drum, making sure there's no major dents in it. Especially, you can get a dent here and it ain't gonna hurt nothing, but if you get a dent here where the chain rides, then the chain will start wearing through the high points of the dent. What's different on these newer combines, 700 series combines, we have a smaller drum, and we also have a 4-strand chain when we used to have just a 3-strand chain. You'd have 1 strand in the middle and then 2 on the sides. But these newer combines, we use a 4-strand chain. Here's our master links here. So we still got 2 half links that can be taken out. But when I looked at the tensioners, they are about the middle of the adjustment, so we don't need to take any links out just yet. And we're back around, so check these caps on the end. Look at the drum stops. Picking up on it, just kind of looking at the bearings. This drum, it's free floating. It's allowed to go up because once crop flow comes into this feeder house, that drum's going to lift up and climb up on top of that crop flow and bring it in. That's why for corn and beans you can have 2 positions on this feeder house drum. You can have it in the low position or the high, and some guys will put it in the low position for beans, but if you're bringing in 40 foot of material in here, that drum's just going to raise up on that material anyway. And then when the material stops, that drum's gonna come back down and hit those stops. So I like to just leave it in the up position for corn and beans until you have an actual feeding problem, which in these crop conditions and the yields that we deal with, we don't have that issue. So I like to leave them up. All right, so on these combines, we have a heavy duty latch set up for this bottom door on the feeder house. So we used to just have this lever, and then we had a cam in here that we were able to move this rod back and forth to put more pressure up on here. So they went ahead and they're having troubles with gaps in here and having leaks. So they went ahead and put these carriage bolts in here, and what these bolts do is allow it to push it even further. And they also have some poly strips on top of this bar that rub on this door, so whenever your feeder house is going up and down, we can maintain a good seal in here, because this has to move up and down. So this gives us an extra adjustment to be able to close that gap, when before all we could do was just adjust this cam. But in order to drop this door down and look up at the bottom of the feeder house where the chain sprockets are, you have to take these nuts off of both sides. And when the taper of the wear gets to the halfway point, then you want to take those strips off and flip them over and rotate your wear strips. I'd say most of these are worn halfway through. They definitely need rotated. I don't see anything amiss. No damage. And so that gives you kind of good indication what the rest of the machine's going to look like. If you got a bunch of damage in the feeder house or the feed accelerator, you can almost expect to see damage in the rotor or the discharge beater, chopper, you know, because that material's got to go out of the machine one way or another. So now we're looking at the sprockets. And these newer combines, they have the new style sprockets. They look a little different than the older ones. But we're looking for hooking in here. And I mean, this one's starting to hook, but you know, it's not to the point where you need to replace them, but we'll take note of it. We'll look at it again next year. But they look to be, you know, fairly decent for the hours it's on the machine. Seems about typical. So this is our stone trap here. So whenever you got rocks and everything, it's gonna drop down in here and keep it from going up into the feed accelerator. So it's a good idea to clean this, you know, once or twice a day, because this will fill up with crop material and not have enough room for the rocks to come down here. So the rocks will just skip over the top of that material and go straight into the machine. We'll inspect this seal. And it's in pretty good shape. And then this door will just come up here and lock with this handle. And then you're supposed to have a clip that goes through these holes right here, but the clip's missing. Because you don't want that door to pop open on you when you're going through the field. You're going to lose a lot of crop. So, see, when it's locked over, you can line those holes up. Now that door's out of the way, we can get a good look at the transmission, check all the lines going to it. There's a pump here on the front of the transmission. This is the hydro motor. This is what's actually turning the transmission. The hydrostatic pump brings forward or reverse pressure to this motor here, and then it turns the transmission. I don't see any leaks anywhere. It's all dry, so that's good. All right, now we're gonna climb underneath there, and I'm gonna check the shoe auger drive shaft. Okay, so here we're underneath the combine. We're gonna check the shoe auger drive. We just reach up here, stick our bar right on the bottom of this lock collar, lift up on it. If that bearing's loose, it'll go up and down. All right, check the backlash on here. Check how the bevel gears are wearing. Check this outer bearing. It's important to check these lock collars here. Make sure they're still on the bearing. That feels good. See, there you go, there's a loose one. See, it didn't take a lot of pressure to get on it. So that one's loose. Check this one. That one's loose. It's pretty loose. Let me move my light. So we'll take Check this outside one. And it's tight. This outside bearing. So looks like we just got two metal shoe augers that are loose. We inspect our lip cylinders, make sure they're not leaking, and that the hose retaining hardware is all there and in place. They look good. We check these cylinders here, our 4.5 tilt. They look good. All the hoses aren't leaking. So here we have a 5-speed feeder house drive, which is, you know, different on an 8-class machine. You can get them on a 7-class machine that has Pro Drive, but it comes standard on a 680, 780, 690, 790. So it has a 3-rib belt, and this is basically a fixed drive. And how it's changing its speed is it gets its power from up there at the 5-speed gearbox up there. Brings the power down. It's got a triple rib belt here to a jack shaft here, and then turns this belt, and then turns our fixed pulley here on the reverser. And this setup is a lot better than the variable speed because you have less moving parts. You don't have shifts that move in and out down here and up here. And it seems to run a little cooler because you don't have that spring pressure on the belt creating heat. So I think the reversers run a little cooler with this setup, and the oil doesn't get as discolored as the variable speeds do. So on this side, we're just going to check the condition of this belt, the upper belt as well. We'll check the multi-coupler here. You can see some of these couplers are pushed in, they're sticking in. There is some gunk in there. We might be able to free it up. It's not leaking. We check the condition of the electrical connector, make sure there's no pins that are backed out or this plastic can crack. We checked, so when you hook a head up, you pull that lever down and it locks your hydraulics and electrical in, but it also pulls a cable here that comes down there and pulls these pins out, and that's how the header is attached. So that's working good. And then we'll check the oil level on this reverser gear case, and it takes synthetic gear oil, and there's a dipstick here that we'll pull out and check it. And you always want to check it with the feeder house all the way up. You don't want to have it down. You're supposed to check the level with it up. I'm going to check the tensioner for this belt, make sure that we got enough room. Check the vent. This is for the reverser gear case. This is a remote mounted vent to keep it from leaking. In the old days, we had like a rattle cap vent on top of this dipstick, and when someone left their head down overnight, the oil would go out of the cooler and fill this gear case, and then when they took off and run, it was over full, and it would cause them to puke that excess oil out the vent right here and just kind of make a mess. And then it looks like something's leaking on the reverser, but it's really just the vent. So we used to have vent kits that we could retrofit the older reversers, but now they just come standard with this remote mounted vent in there. Then we check this valve block here, make sure there's no leaks. Everything looks good there. This is our automatic header height control valve, and we'll take that shield off and make sure there's no leaks there as well. Here, and check the reel pump. Stick my bar in between the pulley and the pump and lift up. Checks the bearings that are on this pulley, and it's tight. It's kind of hard to get in here and see, but check this is the spring tensioner for the upper drive belt. This is the bearing for the feed accelerator. And it's really hard with these floaters on here. It's hard to get in here. and get a bar on it to get enough pressure on it to lift it. And I don't think I can, but maybe. There, I got it. All right, so that's good. Another cool thing he did is he added another grease bank for the bearings here for the reel pump and the feed accelerator and the final drive, because it's really hard to squeeze in here, and he's got it down here where you can grease them right down here, which is pretty handy. So that allows him to be able to service his machine easier without taking a bunch of shields off. And then we'll check the condition of this belt as well. I'll check this reel valve block. Make sure there's no leaks. Everything looks super dry, so I don't think we got any problems there. Okay. Drop the feeder house down so we can inspect the top of it. We're going to take this cover off here so we can check the mid-floor wear strips and get a little better look at the sprockets. Also, we'll be able to kind of peek in and look at the rotor bearing on the front there as well. Hole here. Looks like a mouse ate a hole through this seal right here, so that's going to have to be fixed. Slide these latches over and then lift up on this piece, but it's probably got a bunch of material stuck in it. Where she is. The other side unhooked. Now that we got that door off, you can see the mid-floor wear strips a little better. Right in here, this little plastic strip, and most of them are worn more than halfway through, so we're gonna replace those. And we generally replace those, I don't know, every year or every other year. It just depends on how much they're worn, but they're pretty easy to replace, and of course there's 4 of them on each chain. And we also can get a good look at the rotor bearing up in here, make sure that the seal on it's still in place and that everything looks good on there. It's kind of hard to get in there and actually check it, but when those bearings go out or they're bad, you can feel it in the seat, and of course the vibration from the bad bearing is going to increase with speed. So you generally check that bearing just by the feel of the combine and how it's vibrating or not. But here you can visually inspect it. If you wanted to get in there a little closer, you'd have to take this shield off in here, and then you could get in and see the bearing a little better. Now that we got the feeder house down, we can get a better look in here at our brake valve, our auto track valve, our steering valve. Make sure there's no leaks and none of the hoses are rubbing. We also got two controllers under here. One's our steering controller, one's our transmission controller. Inspect the wiring on it. Alright guys, so that's gonna do it for part one of this video. There was like 2 hours worth of content on this inspection, so I wanted to break it up into 3 parts. I think it'll be easier for you guys to digest all that information instead of sitting for, you know, a 2-hour stretch and taking all that information in. So I decided to split it into 3 parts. So this is the end of part 1. Stay tuned for part 2. Also, a common question I get is, how do I get involved working for John Deere, you know, becoming a John Deere ag technician? Well, I did one video covering how you can go through the John Deere Tech program. You know, there's several locations throughout the United States where you can go through. Mostly it's a community college that has a John Deere Tech program, and I did a video interviewing a tech student on that. So what I wanted to cover is there's also a second way that you can become a John Deere technician, and that is through Sloan's apprenticeship program. And if you guys want to know more about that, I'm going to put a link down in the description, and it'll take you to the Sloan's apprenticeship program landing page. So you can go through that and read it. If you're interested in signing up, there's a way that you can put your contact information in there. So make sure you guys check that out if you're interested in working for Sloan Implement or joining the apprenticeship program. And stay tuned for part 2, because we're going to cover, you know, the left-hand side of the machine in part 2, and then in part 3, you know, we'll finish the inside and around the right side of the machine and engine compartment and grain take area. So see you guys next time.